Marcus Webb was having what he generously called a Tuesday. Which is to say, the ventilation system in Section C was making that wheezing noise again. The coffee machine had achieved sentience and was now refusing to brew anything stronger than dishwater, and somehow, someone had managed to clog a toilet in zero gravity. Don't ask him how. He'd stopped asking those kinds of questions 3 years ago when he took this maintenance gig on Harmony Point, the galaxy's most forgettably remote space station. He was elbow-deep in a particularly vindictive air recycler when the docking bay alarm started shrieking like a banshee with commitment issues. Marcus sighed, wiped his greasy hands on his coveralls, and trudged toward the bay. Probably another supply shipment full of expired ration packs and broken equipment. The glamorous life of deep space maintenance, folks. What he found instead was 8 feet of walking nightmare fuel. The alien standing in the docking bay looked like someone had crossed a grizzly bear with a medieval knight and then given the result anger management issues. Thick, mottled gray skin covered in what appeared to be natural armor plating. Forearms, each ending in claws that could probably open a can of beans or your rib cage with equal efficiency. And the face, oh, the face, was all teeth and glowing amber eyes that suggested she'd eaten scarier things than Marcus for breakfast. "You," the creature rumbled in accented but perfectly clear English, pointing one massive claw at Marcus. "Human, I require your assistance." Marcus blinked. If you're looking for customs, that's Commander Reese's department. I just fix things that leak or explode, sometimes both." "I'm Krexaha of the Vorthak 3rd Battle Fleet," she announced like this should mean something to him. "I have urgent military business that cannot wait. You will tend to my offspring while I am away." "You're what now?" Marcus glanced around the docking bay, wondering if he'd missed something important. Like, say, any evidence of offspring. That's when he heard the growling. 3 small shapes emerged from behind Crakeshaw's legs, and Marcus's definition of cute took a severe beating. The cubs looked like miniature versions of their mother, complete with tiny armor plating and what appeared to be baby fangs. The largest, about the size of a golden retriever, if golden retrievers were built for warfare, had scars that suggested it had opinions about things and wasn't shy about expressing them physically. "This is Zip," Kreksha said, gesturing to the scarred one. "Growl," she indicated the middle cub, who was currently trying to eat what appeared to be a piece of the docking bay floor. "And Tiny," she finished, pointing to the smallest cub. Tiny was the size of a small pony. "Right," Marcus said slowly. "And why exactly are you asking me to babysit your, battle cubs? All other Vortak warriors are engaged in the campaign. You are the only sentient being available on this pathetic excuse for a space station." Kreksha's tone suggested she wasn't thrilled about this arrangement either. "My business will take 3 standard rotations. Do not let them die." "Wait, hang on," Marcus started, but Kreksha was already heading back toward her ship. "I don't know anything about taking care of alien kids. What do they eat? Do they need shots? Are they house-trained?" "Seamen are warriors," Kashir called over her shoulder. "Figure it out." And with that inspiring bit of parental guidance, she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with 3 small aliens who were looking at him with what he could only describe as professional interest, the kind of look a chef gives a particularly promising ingredient. Zip approached first, circling Marcus like a tiny predator sizing up prey. Growl had moved on from trying to eat the floor to sniffing Marcus's boots with alarming intensity. Tiny, meanwhile, had discovered the maintenance cart and was systematically destroying it with the focused dedication of a tiny wrecking ball. "Okay," Marcus said to himself, watching his wrench set scatter across the deck as Tiny demonstrated the structural limitations of human engineering. How hard could this be? The cubs all turned to look at him at once, their glowing eyes reflecting a shared thought that roughly translated to, "Challenge accepted." Marcus Webb was about to get a very comprehensive education in exactly how hard it could be. The first sign that Marcus was in over his head came about 30 seconds after Krekshaw's ship disappeared into hyperspace. Zip had apparently decided that Marcus needed to be tested for worthiness, which in Vorthak culture apparently involved a surprise tackle that sent him sprawling across the docking bay floor. Okay, Marcus wheezed, trying to pry 40 pounds of armored alien child off his chest. "I get it, you're tough. Very intimidating. Gold star for effort." Zip chittered something in her native language that probably translated to either weakling or lunch, neither of which was particularly encouraging. She hopped off Marcus and began what could only be described as a victory dance, which looked disturbingly like a war ritual. Meanwhile, Growl had discovered the emergency supply cabinet and was systematically sampling its contents. By sampling, Marcus meant attempting to devour. The cub had worked through half a box of emergency rations, 2 first aid kits, and was now gnawing thoughtfully on a fire extinguisher. No, no, no! Marcus lunged forward, wrestling the extinguisher away from Growl. That's not food. That's for putting out fires, not starting digestive ones. Growl gave him a look that clearly said, weak human doesn't understand proper nutrition, and moved on to investigate a toolbox. Marcus made a mental note to hide anything that looked remotely edible, which in Growl's case appeared to be everything. Tiny, not to be outdone by her siblings, had located the gravity generator controls and was pushing buttons with the methodical enthusiasm of a toddler who discovered that grown-ups made funny noises when things broke. Marcus felt his stomach do a little flip as the artificial gravity fluctuated between Earth normal and hang on for dear life. Commander Reese is going to have my hide, Marcus muttered, diving for the controls. He managed to stabilize the controls just as Commander Patricia Reese herself came stomping into the docking bay, her face wearing the expression of someone who'd just discovered that her worst day was about to get significantly worse. Commander Reese was what you'd get if you took a military handbook, gave it human form, and then fed it nothing but regulations and disappointment for 30 years. She took one look at the scene. Marcus sprawled on the floor, Zip performing what appeared to be an ancient war chant, Growl attempting to eat a wrench, and Tiny systematically exploring which buttons made the most interesting sounds, and her left eye began to twitch. Webb, she said in the tone of voice usually reserved for announcing executions, would you care to explain why there are 3 unregistered alien life forms destroying my station? Well, Commander, it's funny you should ask, Marcus began, then realized there was absolutely nothing funny about his current situation. See, their mother had some urgent military business. The mother left them with you? Reese's voice climbed several octaves. You, the man who once managed to flood a room in 0 gravity? That was an entirely different situation, involving experimental plumbing and questionable life choices, Marcus protested. And technically, I didn't volunteer for this. I was volunteered, aggressively. Zip chose that moment to demonstrate her approval of the conversation by attempting to climb Commander Reese like a tree. To her credit, Reese only screamed a little bit before Marcus managed to pry the cub off her uniform. According to Vorthak tradition, Marcus explained, holding a squirming Zip at arm's length, cubs are raised through constant combat training and challenges. They're supposed to fight each other for dominance, eat raw meat, and generally behave like tiny soldiers. And what exactly do you know about Vorthak child-rearing practices? Reese demanded, straightening her now shredded uniform. Absolutely nothing, Marcus admitted cheerfully. But I figure it can't be that different from raising human kids, right? Feed them, keep them entertained, make sure they don't kill each other or burn down the station. How hard could it be? As if summoned by his words, an alarm began blaring from the cafeteria. Through the observation window they could see Growl had somehow gotten into the food dispensers and was now covered head to toe in what appeared to be synthetic chocolate pudding, roaring in either triumph or sugar-induced hysteria. Tiny had discovered that the cafeteria tables were the perfect height for jumping practice, and was launching herself from one to another with increasing enthusiasm and decreasing accuracy. Zip, meanwhile, had found the kitchen knives and was conducting what looked like a very serious inspection of their combat worthiness. Webb, Commander Reese said, her voice achieving a level of calm that suggested she was either achieving enlightenment or planning his murder. You have exactly 1 hour to get those creatures under control before I space all 4 of you. Right, Marcus said, watching Tiny attempt to tackle a vending machine. No pressure at all. He was beginning to suspect that Vorthak parenting and human parenting might have a few minor philosophical differences. After the great cafeteria incident of Tuesday afternoon, Marcus decided that maybe, just maybe, he needed to rethink his approach. Sitting in his quarters with 3 alien cubs who were eyeing his furniture like it had personally insulted their ancestors, he came to a startling realization. He was thinking about this all wrong. Okay, listen up, troops, he said, using his best impression of authority. The cubs perked up at the word troops. Apparently military terminology was universal. Your mom says you're warriors, right? Well, every good warrior needs proper training. Zip chittered something that sounded approving. Growl stopped trying to eat Marcus's pillow long enough to pay attention. Tiny paused in her systematic destruction of his coffee table. But here's the thing about human warrior training, Marcus continued, making it up as he went along. We believe in something called tactical preparation. You can't just charge into battle. You need to understand your environment, work as a team, and use your brain as much as your claws. He pulled up his entertainment console and scrolled through the available programs. First lesson, reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. What he'd put on the screen was a nature documentary about Earth wolves. To the cubs, he explained, this was advanced pack hunting strategies and territorial behavior analysis. In reality, he was hoping they'd find it as hypnotically boring as most human children did, and maybe, just maybe, sit still for 30 minutes. It worked, sort of. The cubs watched with intense fascination as the wolves coordinated their hunt, occasionally chittering to each other in what Marcus assumed was tactical commentary. When the wolves brought down their prey, all 3 cubs let out approving growls. See, Marcus said, patience, coordination, working together. That's advanced warrior strategy right there. Next came what Marcus grandly called resource management and distribution protocol, which was actually just snack time. Instead of throwing them raw meat like their mother probably did, he presented them with a variety of human foods, explaining each one in military terms. These are high-energy ration bars for sustained combat operations, he said, handing out granola bars. This is hydration fluid for maintaining peak performance, he continued, offering juice boxes. And these are tactical nutrition supplements for enhanced cognitive function. The tactical nutrition supplements were goldfish crackers, but the cubs didn't need to know that. To his amazement, they not only ate the food but actually seemed to enjoy it. Growl in particular became fascinated with the concept of juice boxes, though he needed some coaching on the mechanics of the straw. Remember, Marcus said, as Growl triumphantly mastered the art of puncturing the foil top, a good warrior adapts to local resources and learns new technologies. The real breakthrough came during what Marcus called advanced combat simulation training, which was actually a selection of age-appropriate video games he'd found in the station's recreational database. He set up 3 controllers and introduced them to Space Marines Tactical Squad Operations. This is virtual reality combat training, he explained as the cubs stared at the colorful graphics. You have to work together to complete the mission. No lone wolf tactics, no fighting each other. Team coordination is the objective. It took them about 10 minutes to figure out the controls, during which time Marcus seriously questioned his life choices. But once they got the hang of it, something magical happened. They started cooperating. Zip naturally took point, calling out enemy positions in her chittering language. Growl covered the flanks, his natural curiosity translating into thorough area sweeps. Tiny, despite her size, turned out to have lightning reflexes and became their designated scout. Outstanding tactical awareness, Marcus praised as they cleared their first level. See how much more effective you are when you work together instead of competing? The cubs exchanged glances that suggested this was a revolutionary concept. By evening, other station crew members had started filtering in to see what all the fuss was about. Engineer Lopez brought his daughter's coloring books, which Marcus immediately rebranded as camouflage pattern design exercises. Dr. Kim contributed some basic puzzles, which became tactical problem-solving scenarios. Even Janitor Pete showed up with a deck of cards, claiming they needed to learn strategic resource allocation through probability management. The cubs ate it up, literally in Growl's case, who tried to taste test the playing cards before Marcus explained they were for mental combat preparation. The real test came when Carexa called for her scheduled check-in. Marcus held his breath as her intimidating face appeared on the communication screen, fully expecting her to be horrified by what she saw. Instead, she found Zip carefully explaining the finer points of poker to Tiny while Growl demonstrated his newly mastered juice box technique to a fascinated Dr. Kim. Human Marcus, Kretschach said slowly, her massive head tilting in confusion. Why are my cubs sitting still? That they're engaged in tactical training exercises, Marcus offered weakly. Semi are not fighting each other. Well, no. They're learning cooperative strategies instead of competitive ones. Team building, unit cohesion. Carexa stared at the screen for a long moment. This is unusual, but they appear content. Content was putting it mildly. For the first time since their arrival, the cubs weren't destroying anything, weren't trying to establish dominance over each other, and weren't treating every interaction as a potential battle. They were actually playing. Mama, Tiny chirped, bouncing over to the screen. Look, I can make the little straw work. She demonstrated her juice box mastery with obvious pride, and Marcus could have sworn he saw something that might have been maternal affection flicker across Krex's terrifying features. Very tactical, Kretsch said carefully. Continue your training exercises. I will return as scheduled. After she signed off, Marcus looked around at his improvised nursery. The cubs were already getting ready for what he'd convinced them was regeneration cycle preparation, also known as bedtime. They'd arranged their sleeping area with military precision, complete with assigned watch rotations that Marcus had no intention of actually enforcing. "You know what?" he said to Lopez, who was teaching Growl the proper way to shuffle cards. "I think we might actually pull this off." Famous last words, as it turned out. Marcus should have known that the universe had a sick sense of humor. Just when things were going smoothly, just when he'd managed to convince 3 alien warrior cubs that cooperative juicebox consumption was the pinnacle of tactical excellence, the cosmos decided to remind him that no good deed goes unpunished. It started with what Commander Reese's emergency protocols cheerfully classified as a minor external disturbance, which in military speak was roughly equivalent to calling a hurricane a bit breezy. Marcus was in the middle of supervising what he dubbed evening reconnaissance training. The cubs were playing hide-and-seek with Engineer Lopez's daughter's stuffed animals when every alarm on Harmony Point started screaming at once. The lights shifted to emergency red, and the station's automated voice began its helpful announcements. "Attention all personnel, unidentified vessels approaching. All personnel report to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." "Oh, come on," Marcus muttered, watching the cubs immediately drop their toys and shift into combat mode. Their playful chittering turned into low, warning growls, and their postures went from relaxed to predatory in about half a second. "Really? Now?" Commander Reese's voice crackled over the intercom, and Marcus could hear the barely controlled panic underneath her professional tone. "All non-essential personnel to emergency shelters immediately. We have multiple bogies inbound, configuration unknown, intentions hostile." Marcus looked at the cubs, who were now clustered together in what was clearly a defensive formation, their glowing eyes scanning for threats. Zip had positioned herself in front of her siblings, while Growl and Tiny flanked her sides. Even in their fear, they were protecting each other. "Okay, troops," Marcus said, falling back on the military language that seemed to calm them. "New mission parameters. We're going to execute a tactical withdrawal to the emergency shelter. Stay close, stay quiet, and follow my lead." The cubs nodded, their earlier playfulness replaced by the focused intensity of trained warriors. It was both impressive and heartbreaking to see how quickly they could switch from children to soldiers. The trip to the emergency shelter should have been routine. Down 3 levels, through the main corridor, into the reinforced safe room where civilians waited out whatever crisis had decided to visit their quiet little station. Should have been routine. Instead, they made it exactly halfway before the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in that lovely red glow that screamed, "Terrible things are happening." Through the observation windows, Marcus could see shapes moving in space. Dark, angular vessels that looked like they'd been designed by someone with a grudge against aesthetics and a passion for intimidation. "Pirates," he breathed, recognizing the ramshackle configuration. Space pirates were like cockroaches. Where you found one, there were always more. And they were invariably bad news for anyone who couldn't fight back. The station shuddered as something impacted the hull. Not weapons fire, boarding clamps. They were being boarded. Marcus's blood ran cold as he heard Commander Reese's voice over the comm, tight with barely controlled panic. "Security teams to docking bays 3 and 7. We have confirmed hostile boarding parties. All civilians remain in shelters." That's when the real problem became apparent. Through the corridors, Marcus could hear the distinctive whine of the station's defense systems powering up, followed immediately by the even more distinctive sound of them powering back down again. Then Commander Reese's voice, no longer bothering to hide her panic. "Engineering, we need defensive systems online now. Primary security grid is not responding." Lopez's voice came back, crackling with static and what sounded like sparks. "Commander, we've got cascade failures across all primary systems. Someone's jamming our electronics. I can't get anything to respond properly." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Harmony Point wasn't a military installation, it was a research and maintenance station. Their security systems consisted mainly of very stern warnings and the hope that anyone hostile would be polite enough to schedule their attacks in advance. The cubs had gone completely still, their enhanced hearing picking up sounds Marcus couldn't detect. Zip's head snapped toward the ceiling, tracking something moving through the ventilation system. Growl's nostrils flared as he sampled the air, clearly detecting unfamiliar scents. Tiny crouched lower, her small frame coiled like a spring. "Bad humans coming," Zip whispered in heavily accented English, her first words in Marcus's language since they'd met. "Smell wrong. Smell like hurt things." Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. These weren't just children he was responsible for, they were alien children, cubs of a warrior race, entrusted to his care by their mother who'd explicitly told him not to let them die. And now actual space pirates were boarding the station, while the defenses failed, and the security team was probably already in over their heads. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the corridors, distant but getting closer. Marcus made a decision that probably qualified as either heroic or spectacularly stupid. Change of plans, he told the cubs, his voice steadier than he felt. New mission objective, protect the pack. The cubs looked at him with something that might have been respect or hunger. With alien facial expressions, it was hard to tell. Listen carefully, Marcus continued, his mind racing through everything he knew about the station's layout, its weaknesses, and the various ways creative maintenance could be weaponized. Your mother left you in my care, which makes me your temporary pack leader. That means it's my job to keep you safe, and your job to trust me. Can you do that? 3 small heads nodded with absolute seriousness. Good, because we're about to show these pirates why you don't mess with a human's cubs. The cubs exchanged glances that suggested they found this idea both fascinating and potentially entertaining. Marcus hoped he could live up to their expectations. Through the corridor windows, he could see the first of the boarding party making their way through the station, a mix of species, all armed, all moving with the casual confidence of predators who'd done this many times before. They were splitting up, some heading for the bridge, others toward the civilian shelters. Marcus counted at least 12 hostiles, possibly more, against a maintenance worker and 3 alien children. Tactical assessment, he murmured to himself, then louder to the cubs. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and in an environment we know better than they do. Recommendations? Zip tilted her head, considering. Home advantage, she said carefully, clearly proud of the human phrase she'd learned. Know where things are, bad humans don't. Exactly right. Growled. What's your assessment? Growl sniffed the air again, then pointed toward the ventilation grate above them. Secret paths. Small spaces. We fit, they don't. Outstanding tactical thinking. Tiny? The smallest cub looked up at Marcus with eyes that were far too old for her age. Pack protects pack, she said simply. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. These weren't just alien cubs anymore. They were his cubs, and he'd be damned if he let anything happen to them. All right then, he said, checking his tool belt and mentally cataloging every maintenance trick he'd learned in 3 years of keeping this bucket of bolts running. Time to show these pirates what happens when you threaten a human's family. The cubs growled in unison, a sound that was part agreement, part battle cry, and entirely terrifying. Marcus Webb, maintenance worker and accidental surrogate father, was about to have a very educational day. What followed could only be described as the galaxy's most unconventional military operation, conducted by the universe's most unlikely strike team. Marcus had spent 3 years learning every pipe, wire, and ventilation shaft on Harmony Point, but he'd never imagined he'd be using that knowledge to conduct guerrilla warfare with 3 alien cubs as his squad. Remember the video game training, Marcus whispered as they crawled through the maintenance tunnels above the main corridor. Zip, your point and tactical coordination. Growl, your reconnaissance. That nose of yours is better than any scanner. Tiny, you're our mobility specialist and backup. The cubs nodded, their earlier playfulness completely replaced by focused intensity. Marcus was starting to understand why the Vortec Empire was considered a military powerhouse. Even as children, these 3 had tactical instincts that would make seasoned soldiers jealous. Their first target was the group of pirates heading for the civilian shelters. Through the grating, Marcus could see 6 heavily armed figures making their way down the corridor with the casual arrogance of predators who'd never encountered real resistance. Phase 1, Marcus murmured, pulling out his maintenance tablet and accessing the station's environmental controls. Environmental manipulation. He triggered the emergency fire suppression system in that section. Instantly, the corridor filled with thick, choking foam designed to smother electrical fires. The pirates stumbled around, cursing in 3 different languages as their visibility dropped to 0. Growled, can you track them by scent through this? The young cub inhaled deeply, then nodded and pointed in precise directions, indicating each pirate's location despite the foam obscuring everything. Marcus grinned. Advanced sensory reconnaissance indeed. Zip, remember the distraction and misdirection tactics from our strategy games? The eldest cub's eyes gleamed with understanding. She chittered something to her siblings, and suddenly all 3 cubs were moving through the ventilation system with predatory grace, making noise at different points to confuse and disorient the blinded pirates below. Marcus, meanwhile, had accessed the corridor's artificial gravity controls. A few quick adjustments, and suddenly the pirates found themselves dealing with rapidly fluctuating gravity that sent them floating into walls one moment and crashing to the floor the next. "What the hell is happening?" one of the pirates shouted just before Tiny dropped through a ceiling vent behind him and performed what could generously be called a tactical ankle bite. The pirate went down screaming, more from surprise than injury, but the psychological effect on his companions was immediate and severe. "There's something in the vents!" another pirate yelled, firing wildly at shadows while foam and shifting gravity made accuracy impossible. The cubs had vanished back into the ventilation system before anyone could get a clear shot, but the damage was done. The pirate squad was now officially panicked, disoriented, and completely ineffective. "Outstanding execution," Marcus whispered as they regrouped in a junction box. Phase 2. Divide and conquer. The second group of pirates had made it to the bridge, where Commander Reese and her skeleton crew were making their last stand. Through his maintenance access, Marcus could see them barricaded behind overturned consoles while the pirates methodically worked to break through the blast doors. "Time for some creative engineering," Marcus muttered, accessing the power distribution grid. "Growl, I need you to get into the wall conduits behind the bridge. There's a junction box about 3 meters to your left from the main door. Can you handle that?" Growl nodded and squeezed into a gap that Marcus wouldn't have thought could fit a house cat, let alone an alien cub. Within minutes, he was signaling from inside the walls. "Perfect. When I give the signal, I want you to chew through the red wire bundle, just the red ones. Can you do that without getting electrocuted?" Growl gave him a look that clearly conveyed, "Please, I eat fire extinguishers for fun," and positioned himself by the wires. Marcus turned to Zip and Tiny. "You two are going to execute a classic pincer movement. Tiny, can you get into the air ducts above the bridge? Zip, there's a maintenance hatch behind the bridge console that leads to the storage area. I need you in position there." As the cubs moved into position, Marcus began the most complex bit of technical sabotage he'd ever attempted. Using his maintenance access, he began systematically overloading the power conduits feeding the pirates' equipment. Their weapons started sparking and misfiring. Their communication devices filled with static. Their portable scanners began displaying what appeared to be abstract art instead of tactical information. "Now, Growl." The lights on the bridge went out completely, plunging everything into darkness. But Marcus had spent 3 years working in these spaces. He knew exactly where everything was. The pirates didn't. "Tiny, sound off." A bone-chilling howl echoed through the air ducts, seeming to come from everywhere at once. The pirates spun around wildly, trying to track a sound that was deliberately designed to confuse directional perception. "Zip, go!" The hatch behind the command console burst open, and Zip launched herself in a perfect tactical roll that would have made her mother proud. She didn't attack the pirates directly. Instead, she went straight for their equipment, systematically destroying anything that looked important with the precision of a tiny, furry demolitions expert. Marcus reactivated the lights just as the pirates were starting to panic, revealing Commander Reese and her crew very much alive and now armed with weapons that actually worked, while the pirates found themselves equipped with very expensive paperweights. "Stand down," Reese barked, and suddenly the bridge was under friendly control again. But Marcus wasn't done yet. The remaining pirates were scattered throughout the station, and his cubs were just getting warmed up. "Tactical assessment," he called softly to the cubs as they regrouped in the corridor. "How are we doing, team?" "Pirates are confused," Zip reported with satisfaction. "Don't understand station. Don't work together good." "Their equipment smells broken," Growl added helpfully. "Also, they smell scared now." "Semi run away from small noises," Tiny observed with what might have been amusement. "Not very brave for raiders." Marcus grinned. These cubs had taken to asymmetric warfare like ducks to water. No, that wasn't quite right. They'd taken to it like Vorthak warriors to a perfectly orchestrated battle plan. Outstanding situational analysis, ready for Phase 3. The cubs exchanged glances, and Marcus could practically see the tactical communications passing between them. They'd gone from competing individuals to a coordinated team in just a few days, and now they were operating with the smooth efficiency of a special forces unit. "What's Phase 3? Zip asked, her English improving by the hour. Marcus checked his tablet, noting the positions of the remaining pirates scattered throughout the station. Most of them were now actively trying to retreat back to their ships, their confidence thoroughly shattered by encounters with invisible enemies, malfunctioning equipment, and an environment that seemed to be actively hostile to their presence. "Phase 3, Marcus said, is where we show them that when you mess with our pack, you don't just deal with the cubs, you deal with the whole family." He opened a station-wide communication channel, his voice echoing through every speaker on Harmony Point. Attention boarding parties. This is Marcus Webb, head of station maintenance and, apparently, tactical operations. You have 10 minutes to return to your ships and leave our space. Any personnel found on this station after that time will be considered hostile combatants and dealt with accordingly. There was a pause, then a gruff voice responded over the pirates' communication frequency. You think you can threaten us, maintenance monkey? We've got superior numbers and firepower. Marcus looked down at the cubs, who were watching him with expressions of absolute trust and confidence. They believed he could protect them. More than that, they were ready to protect him right back. Actually, Marcus replied, his voice carrying throughout the station, I've got something better than numbers and firepower. I've got family. The cubs roared in unison, a sound that echoed through the corridors and made every pirate on the station suddenly reconsider their career choices. And in that moment, Marcus Webb realized something that would have amazed him a week ago. He wasn't just babysitting alien cubs anymore. He was leading a pack. His pack. The pirates started running for their ships. Smart move. By the time Crickshaw's ship appeared on the edge of Harmony Point's sensor range, the last of the pirate vessels was disappearing into hyperspace, with what Marcus could only describe as unseemly haste. The station's corridors were back to normal, if you ignored the lingering smell of fire suppression foam and the occasional scorch mark where creative electrical work had been employed for tactical purposes. Marcus was in the docking bay with the cubs, ostensibly doing post-mission equipment checks, but actually just enjoying the satisfied exhaustion that came after a job well done. The cubs were sprawled around his feet in a loose circle, grooming each other and occasionally chittering about particularly clever moments from their impromptu military operation. Pack letter Marcus, Zip said, having apparently decided that his official title needed upgrading. When Mama returns, do we tell her about the battle? Well, Marcus said, checking his tablet to make sure all station systems were back online. I think she's going to notice the scorch marks and the fact that we're all still alive, despite being attacked by pirates, so probably yes. Tiny looked up from where she'd been using Growl as a pillow. Will she be proud that we fought well? Marcus felt that familiar twist in his chest. Kiddo, I think your mom is going to be very proud of how you handled yourselves. You were brave, smart, and you worked together like a real team. Like a real pack, Growl corrected, and Marcus couldn't argue with that assessment. Crex's ship docked with the kind of precision that suggested she was either an exceptional pilot or in a very big hurry. Possibly both. The airlock cycled open, and she emerged looking exactly as intimidating as Marcus remembered. Except now he was fairly certain he could see anxiety in those glowing amber eyes. Cubs, she rumbled, and suddenly 3 small bodies were launching themselves at their mother with joyful chittering. She caught them easily, all 4 arms wrapping around her offspring as she conducted what appeared to be a very thorough inspection for injuries. Human Marcus, she said over the cubs' excited babbling. Explain why my cubs appear to be unharmed despite the clear evidence of recent combat throughout this station. Marcus straightened up, suddenly feeling like he was about to face the most important performance review of his life. Well, ma'am, we encountered a hostile boarding party approximately 6 hours ago. 12 to 15 pirates with standard small arms and boarding equipment. The cubs and I executed a series of tactical operations to neutralize the threat and protect the civilian population. Crex's massive head tilted slightly. You fought alongside my cubs? More like they fought alongside me, Marcus admitted. They're natural tacticians, ma'am. Outstanding situational awareness, excellent coordination, and they adapt to new strategies faster than anyone I've ever worked with. The cubs had calmed down enough to start providing their own after-action report, chittering rapidly in their native language while occasionally pointing at Marcus. He caught enough words to understand they were describing the battle in enthusiastic detail. Crexa listened to their report with growing amazement, her fierce expression gradually shifting to something that might have been pride mixed with complete bewilderment. Debye say, she said slowly, that you taught them to fight as a pack, that you used cunning and environmental manipulation instead of direct confrontation, that you protected them while allowing them to contribute to the victory. That's accurate, yes, ma'am. They also say, Craigshaw continued, her tone becoming more puzzled, that you fed them tactical nutrition supplements and conducted reconnaissance training using something called nature documentaries. Marcus felt heat creeping up his neck. Well, I had to adapt your traditional training methods to the available resources and a local cultural context. Show me, Crexu commanded. So Marcus found himself giving an alien warrior a tour of his improvised childcare techniques. He demonstrated the juice box mastery that Grawl had perfected, explained the tactical principles behind cooperative gaming, and showed her the camouflage pattern design exercises that had kept the cubs occupied for hours. Krexa examined everything with the intensity of a general reviewing battle plans. She watched silently as Zip demonstrated her card-playing skills, as Growl showed off his ability to solve puzzles through systematic analysis, and as Tiny performed a flawless tactical role that transitioned seamlessly into what was obviously a request for belly rubs. "This is," Krexa began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with the concept. "This is not how Vorthak cubs are traditionally raised." "No, ma'am," Marcus agreed, "but it seemed to work pretty well when things got serious." "Indeed." Krexa was quiet for a long moment, watching her cubs interact with Marcus. They clustered around him naturally, seeking his approval and attention in a way that suggested deep affection rather than fearful respect. "Human Marcus, I must confess something to you." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Ma'am?" "There was no urgent military business that required my immediate attention." The docking bay went very quiet. Even the cubs stopped their chittering to listen. "This was a test," Krexa continued, her voice carrying a weight that suggested this was more important than Marcus had realized. "The Vorthak High Command has been concerned about our traditional child-rearing methods. Our warriors are strong, but they struggle with cooperation, creative problem-solving, and adaptability. We have been studying other species' approaches to juvenile development." Marcus blinked. "You've been studying human parenting?" "Human child-rearing produce adults who are innovative, cooperative, and capable of finding unconventional solutions to complex problems," Krexa explained, qualities that are becoming increasingly valuable in modern warfare and diplomacy. The High Command wanted to understand how these traits could be integrated with traditional Vorthak warrior training. "So you left your cubs with a random human maintenance worker to see what would happen?" "You were not random," Krexa said, and Marcus could swear there was amusement in her tone. "You were selected after extensive observation. Your personnel file indicated creativity, problem-solving ability, and a protective instinct toward those in your care. The fact that you had no formal training in child-rearing was considered an advantage." Marcus looked down at the cubs, who were watching this exchange with obvious fascination. "So this whole thing was an experiment?" "It was a test," Krexa corrected. "One that you and my cubs passed beyond all expectations. You taught them to maintain their warrior instincts while developing cooperation, empathy, and creative thinking. When faced with real danger, they were more effective than cubs trained through traditional methods would have been." She paused, looking directly at Marcus with those intimidating amber eyes. "The High Command has asked me to make you an offer." "An offer?" "The position of Cultural Integration Specialist for the Vorthak Empire. You would be responsible for developing new training protocols that combine human child-rearing techniques with Vorthak warrior traditions. The compensation would be substantial." Marcus felt his head spinning. A week ago, his biggest concern had been a malfunctioning coffee machine. Now he was being offered a job with one of the galaxy's most powerful military empires. That's incredibly flattering, ma'am, but Pack leader Marcus cannot leave us," Zip interrupted, her English suddenly much more fluent than it had been moments before. "We are his cubs. He is our pack leader." "Cubs do not abandon pack leaders," Growl added firmly. "Pack stays together," Tiny declared with the absolute certainty of someone stating a fundamental law of the universe. Krexa looked at her cubs, then at Marcus, then back at her cubs. "I see. And what if pack leader Marcus were to bring his cubs with him to his new position?" The cubs erupted in excited chittering, bouncing around Marcus like tiny celebrations of chaos theory. Marcus, meanwhile, was trying to process the fact that he was apparently being adopted by an alien military empire. "You're offering me a job that comes with custody of 3 alien warrior cubs?" "I am offering you a position that recognizes what you have already become," Krexa said solemnly. "A pack leader who has proven capable of raising warriors who are both strong and wise." Marcus looked around the docking bay, at the scorch marks from their recent battle, at the cubs who were looking at him with absolute trust and affection, at Commander Reese, who had appeared in the doorway and was listening with barely concealed amazement. "Commander," he called out, "how do you feel about the idea of Harmony Point becoming the galaxy's first interspecies daycare center?" Reese stared at him for a long moment. "Webb, a week ago you flooded a room in zero gravity. Now you're being headhunted by alien military empires. I've stopped trying to understand your career trajectory." Marcus grinned, looking down at the cubs, who were practically vibrating with excitement. They'd started this as an unwanted responsibility. Somewhere along the way, they'd become family. "Well," he said to Kreksha, "I guess I'm going to need to update my resume. Think the Vortak Empire has good benefits?" "The best in the galaxy," Kreksha assured him, "and comprehensive medical coverage for all dependents." "Pack leader Marcus," Tiny squeaked, tugging on his coveralls. "Does this mean we get to keep having tactical nutrition supplement time?" Marcus laughed, reaching down to ruffle what passed for hair on the small cub's head. "Kid, I think we're going to have to teach a whole empire about the strategic value of juice boxes." The cubs roared their approval. Commander Reese shook her head in defeat, and Marcus Webb, former maintenance worker and current architect of Interspecies childcare revolution, realized that sometimes the best career moves were the ones you never saw coming. After all, how hard could revolutionizing alien parenting across an entire military empire be? Famous last words, but at this point Marcus was starting to enjoy the challenge.